All right, ranking my favorite prospects 1 through 64, so the first 2 rounds. And let's not spend forever talking about the setup here. Let's mostly just get into it. One thing I want to explain real quick, though, just before we get into this list, is I have a scoring system. Each player has a number score. Just wanted to explain what that is real quick. This is that scoring system, so basically the maximum grade you can get is 10 overall. However, that would be very rare. As you see, 9.25 is what a first overall pick would get on an average year. So basically the whole point of this scale was I didn't want there to be someone who gets a maximum score. It could happen. It didn't happen in this draft, but maybe some other drafts it would happen. But yeah, that's basically how the scale worked, is whatever your score was will align with, kind of where this is. So basically, an 8.00, that is a fringe first round pick, 9.00, a top 5 pick, 9.25, a first overall pick. You get the idea. So let's just get into it, starting with the bottom section here, 54 through 64. We'll read bottom to top, which might make things a little confusing, but that's how I formatted it. So let's just go. And again, just so I think you can figure this out on your own, but in case you can't, all the way at the left, that's the number that they got in terms of their ranking. Then the player name, you then have their score. So Kenyon Green is 7.3, which is a little bit higher than a typical fringe second round grade. So I think it's a pretty deep draft. And then all the way at the end, G stands for guard, of course. So Kenyon Green, I'm lower on him than some. I still do have a second round grade on him. Still do have him as a 64th overall prospect. Just too many bad games on tape for me with Green, so I'm a little bit lower on him than others. We then have some tight ends: Trey McBride, Greg Duklich. Pronunciations are never my strong suit, and Isaiah Likely, all there with the tight end run, and then Abraham Lucas over at 60. The rest of the list is a group of wide receivers, and I'm kind of similar about all these guys. You have Traylon Burks, you have Justin Ross, the Clemson wide receiver, Khalil Shakir, and Christian Watson. There's stuff to like about all of their games, which is why I have them here, but I also think there's legitimate concerns to have about all of their games. Quite frankly, I wouldn't hate spending a second round pick on any of these guys. I kind of always like the idea of spending second and third round picks on wide receivers, so there's stuff to like about them, but there's legitimate concerns I have about them as well. At the top of this section, a couple of certainly controversial takes here. I think a lot of people have Benito higher, and everyone has Jermaine Johnson higher than 54. I'm just not that crazy about either of these guys. We'll start with Benito. One of my concerns with him is I just feel like too many of his wins came in non-traditional ways. They came with sort of these speed rush moves that I just don't think would work at the NFL level, even though it did work in college, so there is at least production there. For Jermaine Johnson, the production really wasn't there that much. He got sacks, had a good amount of sacks, but it seemed like basically every time he got a pressure, it was a sack. He didn't get a ton of pressures, and that's what would concern me a little bit from Johnson. There again, the physical tools he has, it's still interesting, but that's why I'm lower on him. All right, next chunk here, you see that again at the bottom, Trayvon Walker, another edge guy that some people are higher on than I am. He just didn't have the production for me. With edge and offensive line, I want production. If you don't have production, I'm willing to take a chance on you, but at 53, not at 1 overall. Chase Garbers, the quarterback, who I actually think that he's kind of a really slept-on quarterback and could be an interesting player. I don't think he'll go round 2. I think he'll drop significantly. He might not get drafted, to be honest, but I still think he's a really interesting player and someone who kind of similar to Zappy, who I have similar score values attributed to. Guys just I kind of like as flyers. Nero Farrell, the interior defensive lineman, I think really could surprise some people. I see him dropping out of the top 100 on certain boards. I would certainly take him with a second round pick, and definitely a third round pick or fourth round, which might be able to get him in. And in Jalen Amar Davis, another very interesting corner. You then have Majai Sanders, a guy who I think could be very fascinating. Bailey Zappi, quarterback at 48. Kind of talked about him with Garbers. Guy you take a flyer on. Wouldn't get too much more excited than that. Kirby Joseph, who I do find interesting. And again, someone who I could see stepping in and playing. These are we're getting to the point where these are guys where it's like they have legitimate value, day one potentially. Leo Chenal, Again, I'm lower on him than some others are. I think that he's mostly just a run-stopping guy. In the right scheme, he can be effective, but he needs to be in the right scheme. I do like Chad Muma a little bit better, not much better, only one spot ahead. And then Kyler Gordon, who I think is a really interesting corner, and I could certainly see him having some success. These are the players I think I do like. I think there's I do feel like there is a tier gap once you get to 44 and up, because like Jordan Davis as well. Do I have a second round grade on him? Yes, you can see that. But at the same time, like, there is stuff to like about him. I keep saying my issue with him is he's a one-trick pony. But the flip side is, well, he's really good at that one trick. I want to see a more complete guy and someone who I can trust to play more than 300 snaps before I spend a first-round pick on him. Finally, over here, so this is going to be the cutoff of round 2. These are the rest of the round 2 prospects I have. Sam Howell at 42, Desmond Ridder at 41. So we finally get some quarterbacks there. They're interesting guys. I don't hate taking flyers on them, especially in the second round, but there's guys I would rather have. Like, you look at the few players ahead of them, Brian Cook, John Mechie, Sky Moore, Travis Jones even. Those are guys who I do kind of feel like, and for me, they feel like they're going to be immediate contributors. I'd rather have the immediate contributors earlier than a flyer quarterback. That's kind of how I view it. But again, a lot of it comes down to situation. Where is your team at? All of that stuff. And I should make sure I mention that I do factor in positional value into these grades, which is part of why Kenny Pickett at 36 is there. I don't think he's better than Sky Moore if you take out positional value, but I'm not taking out positional value, so that's why he has a higher grade. Kyle Hamilton at 35 and Chris Olave at 34 are certainly going to be two guys that are, people are surprised fall this far, but I think with Olave, he fell maybe 10 spots behind consensus. I'm only a little bit lower on him than most. My issues with him were simply I felt like too much of his wins came from just pure speed or what was set up from the speed. When you play faster corners, will that still translate? That's just enough to get me a little bit more concerned than some others. There's still plenty to like about him. Kyle Hamilton, yeah, I'm just not as big of a fan of as other people are with Kyle Hamilton. Again, there's stuff to like about him, but I just don't see him as a deep safety. And if you want to see more about that, I've talked about it a good amount now, but you can check out my multiple videos on him. Finally, 33, Logan Hall, which it just feels weird that Logan Hall is not currently one of my top 32 players, because I really do like him. And again, you see that the grade is an 8.10, which is a solid grade for a player. Like, I do legitimately like Logan Hall, and in a typical draft, I would have a first-round grade on him. This is just a deeper class. That's really what it comes down to. All right, next 11 guys here, again, starting from the bottom and working our way up. Jaquan Brisker, a safety who I just like. He's just always in the right position, in my opinion, and that's what I like about safeties. That's what I look for. Are you constantly in position to make a play? He is. Garrett Wilson, wide receiver, again, Ohio State guy who a lot of people would have higher. I still like him. I still do have a first-round grade on him. I'm just a little bit lower on than some others. He's another guy where I feel like most of his wins did come from speed or what his speed set up, and I do kind of get a little bit of Hollywood Brown vibes, which is still a good player, but just maybe not incredible. I don't know if he's amazing at anything. He's really good at a lot, but is he great at anything? I don't know. He's also not the biggest guy, so there's that. Number 30, David Ojabo, who you might be wondering, wait a second, if you're all about production, why are you having Ojabo higher? He's more of a developmental guy. Well, I kind of buy into why he might need more time to develop. He didn't have a ton of playing time, whereas these other guys had plenty of playing time, so there's that. And also, he had more production than some of these other guys, so that's why I still like Ojabo more than maybe, it might seem, given the fact that I don't love developmental guys, but I don't think he's just a developmental guy. Number 29, Andrew Booth, corner. 28, Trevor Penning, offensive tackle, with Drake Jackson and Darian Kennard. I think 26 and 27 are probably a bit of surprises, and honestly, even 25 as well might be a bit of a surprise how high these guys are. But again, for offensive linemen and defensive linemen, production matters. And Kennard was the offensive tackle for Kentucky who had plenty of production. Drake Jackson had production and looked really good while doing it. So those are two guys that I think people are sleeping on. And George Pickens has injury concerns out of Georgia. That's very fair, but it was really good when he was out there. So a top 25 player, George Pickens is, in my opinion. 24, Zion Johnson. I keep just feeling like Johnson's one of those guys where he's probably just going to be a solid guard. I don't see a sky-high potential with him. I don't see a deep floor with him. I think that he is going to be just a solid guard, in my opinion. 23, Cameron Thomas, another really good edge guy who got consistent pressure. He might be one of my biggest sleepers coming into this draft. And then Lewis Kine. I keep hearing it pronounced different ways. Cannot figure out how to pronounce it. I apologize, Lewis. But number 22 here. I like him. Covers a lot of ground. Good coverage safety. Is a little bit small. I get that. That's a fair concern to have. But other than that, I think he's really good. Next chunk here, Trent McDuffie, cornerback, and Kair Elam, who I misspelled Kair's name there. Should be two I's, not an L and an I, but okay. Elam there at 19. I know you probably have seen plenty of misspellings. This was just taken directly from my notes. I didn't bother to fact check all this stuff. There's even some, sometimes it's periods, sometimes it's colons. Why to do it that way? Whatever. I just figured to throw this up. But anyways, I like those two corners. Really, if you're a man team, draft Elam. If you're a zone team, draft McDuffie. That's how I feel about those two guys. We have another edge guy who many people might not be this high on, Arnold Ebiketie, who really, again, if we're talking about guys who get consistent pressure, his pass rush tape is fantastic. He will get beat in the running game at times. That is fair to say, but I don't think he's a disaster there. And just his pass rush tape is good. His production is good. That's what I like about him. Drake London here at 17. Drake London, my second highest graded wide receiver. There's just so much to like about him. The only concern I really have is the speed, and that does drop him down a little bit. He isn't the fastest receiver, but he checks all the other boxes. He's, very tall and a great route runner, so a lot to like about him. Nakobe Dean, again, the only real concerns I have about him might be that I'm not sure how complete of a linebacker he is, but he certainly does the things that he does well, very well, so that's the exciting thing with him. Bernard Raymond, another guy who, again, gets a lot of production, really good tackle. In fact, you see I have him and Neal kind of in that same tier at 15 and 14. I do think Neal's the better player, but I don't think it's as big of a jump as you might think. So whoever ends up with Raymond might get a good value pick there, as, looks like those top three tackles are going to go very early. Maybe the fourth tackle you can get pretty good value on. Devontae Wyatt at 13, another guy who I really like. And then at 11 and 12, Malik Willis and Matt Corral. Yep, I have two quarterbacks here in the top 12. Again, positional value matters so much. I think there's enough good on both of these guys' tape that I'm willing to draft them above guys who I think will be very good. Devontae Wyatt, Evan Neal, and Bernard Raymond, and even going further down, those are like pretty solid prospects that I feel very good about. But just if it works out, is just so much more valuable for Malik Willis and Matt Corral than with Devontae Wyatt and Evan Neal. You need a good quarterback to have success in the NFL in today's age. I know there's been exceptions, but those are exceptions, not the rule. You almost always, if you're going to be successful, need a good quarterback, or at least a quality quarterback on a rookie deal, which is what makes, I think, both of those guys interesting options. And then finally, top 10, what you're all here to see, the fun part here. Jamison Williams, number 10. Again, I just like him. I know the injury stuff is there, but I just think he's the most complete wide receiver in this draft class, one healthy. Tyler Linderbaum, I get it. He's a little bit smaller, and he's a center. So, quite frankly, the reality is the biggest concern about Linderbaum is the position he plays. Centers aren't as valuable as other positions. But if, we took positional value out of the equation, he's probably my number one player, or maybe number two behind Hutchinson. He's really good. I really like him, and whoever gets him should have a great quality center for years to come. Number 8, George Karlaftis, who has a fun name and has some fun tape as well. Now, sometimes the tape looks a little weird, but the reality is he just constantly gets pressure. He's someone who just has insane production out of that edge position, and those guys tend to hit in the NFL, which is what I like about him. Couple of offensive linemen, Cross and Ikwanyu there. Yes, I have Ikwanyu higher than Cross, even though I'm not sure if Ikwanyu is going to be the guard or the tackle. But again, I like them both a lot. They're up here, top 7 prospects. You do notice that there's not quite as good of grades with these top 5 guys as maybe you might expect, because typically, above a 9 grade is a top 5. Really kind of what this draft is missing is just like one elite, first overall pick type player, which I don't think it has, but if it had that, then it would be like one of the most loaded drafts ever. It's like that's how close it is, I feel like. But still, you have Derek Stingley at 5, who still is very good. That's still like a top 10 pick grade, which is probably where he's going to end up going. He is my 5th favorite player. I drafted him with the Orlando Ostriches. If you don't understand that reference, definitely check out my video about making my own football team with the Orlando Ostriches. Hail to the Ostriches. Top 4, Devin Lloyd, number 4. Yeah, I think he's awesome. I think he's really good. I do have him as my 4th favorite prospect, and he might go mid-first round, so that would be a good steal. Again, positional value knocks him a little bit, but I still view him as like if Devin White went pick 5 overall, like Devin Lloyd, in my opinion, is a better prospect than White was. So that's how I view it, although I wasn't crazy about White coming out of the draft, so maybe that's on me. But Kayvon Thibodeau, number 3, who's been he's a hot rod, a lightning rod is what I'm looking for. Not a hot rod. I don't think that's a thing. He's been a lightning rod for criticism or just like discussion in general. Some people think he's number 1 overall. Some people think he's outside of the top 10. Very unique player. I guess not quite as, big of a jump as Trayvon Walker, who some have 1st overall and I don't have as a top 50, but he's still in that interesting category. I still think he's the 2nd best edge rusher, not the 2nd best player though. That's good old Sauce Gardner, who I like Sauce. I think he's really good. I think he's a fantastic corner. He checks off all of the boxes you would want to check. You never know with corners. It's a tough position to evaluate, but it's so important to get a good corner that I think he'd be worth a number 2 overall pick. However, not number 1. That is Aiden Hutchinson, which, again, you look at this chart and you kind of see, okay, that's how I view Hutchinson, because I feel glowingly talked about him and kind of said he is, my favorite player in this draft, definitively. But you see this, I don't have it that much different than Sauce Gardner, and I don't have him as a 925, which would be an average 1st overall pick. I do think this is a little bit of a weaker class when it comes to the top 3 picks, for example. Like Hutchinson, Gardner, and Thibodeau are all really good players, but in a typical draft, those are kind of guys you expect to go like 4, 5, and 6. But that's okay. Like there are no Trevor Lawrence's of this draft, so you got to get the next best player, and Hutchinson is a great next best player. If we talk about how much do you win, he wins constantly, and even his losses look impressive. He's someone who I'm very high on, so that's why he's number 1 on my list. That is my top 64. I'm sure you all totally agree and do not have any disagreements whatsoever, so you don't even need to comment. But you can if you want to anyways, because I always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.